SHRM, the organization that trains HR professionals around the world, just got hit with a $11.5 million jury verdict. And the charges? Racial discrimination and retaliation. Let me say that again. The Society for Human Resources Management, the organization that sets the standards for how companies should lead, investigate, and build their workplaces, was just found liable for failing to do those very things. Now, I'm Latisha Newby. I'm an HR attorney, SHRM certification instructor, and someone who believes deeply in the power of good leadership, fair processes, and building workplaces that truly reflect the values we talk about in our policies. Now, I've trained hundreds of HR professionals, managers, and business leaders on how to investigate complaints, avoid retaliation, and lead with integrity. Not just when it's easy, but even when it's hard. And that's why this case matters to me. And if you are an HR professional, a business leader, or even an employee, you're going to want to stay tuned, because in this video, I'm going to walk you through what happened, what we know from the trial, and most importantly, what every workplace can take away from this. So Mohamed was a senior instructional designer at SHRM. She joined the organization in 2016 with over 15 years of experience in her field. Her reviews were consistently positive, her performance was strong, and she was even described as a role model by senior leadership. So what happened? Now, in 2020, she got a new manager. And according to court documents and testimony that was presented during the 3-week trial, Mohamed, who is an Egyptian American, was subjected to excessive micromanagement that her white colleagues did not experience. She was required to CC her manager on every communication, even routine emails to vendors that she had worked with for years. She was now being excluded from meetings that she used to lead and had previously received commendations for. Her work was repeatedly credited to others, primarily her white team members. And perhaps most telling, she faced criticism for the same behaviors that were praised in her white colleagues. So in June 2020, amid the national conversation around racial justice, she reported these issues to SHRM. She reported them to her HR department, and she reported them to SHRM's leadership. She followed SHRM's policy to the letter. She did everything that she was supposed to do as an employee. So where did things fall apart? You see, SHRM launched an internal investigation, but here's what actually came out in court. The investigator assigned to her complaint was from SHRM's own employee relations team. He admitted under oath that this was his first ever discrimination case. He had only attended one training session on how to investigate discrimination complaints. And then on the witness stand, he couldn't even recall basic investigation protocols that SHRM teaches to HR professionals. Even worse, emails that were entered into evidence actually showed that this investigator was actively advising Mohamed's manager on the performance-related communications during the investigation. So the person who was supposed to be investigating her complaint was also helping her manager draft a performance improvement plan while the complaint was still open. I need you all to think about this. This person who was supposed to be neutral, who was supposed to be the investigator, was actively helping the manager whose conduct was clearly under review. This is exactly the type of practice that adds to the negative narrative about HR professionals. The ones that say HR isn't here for the employees. HR is just to protect the company. HR works with the managers. The reason that these kinds of comments show up in the HR space is exactly because of stuff like this. This type of behavior undermines the credibility of our entire profession. When those who are entrusted with fair investigations appear to have taken sides before the facts are fully gathered, that is a problem. And when it happens at SHRM itself, that sends a devastating message about the state of workplace investigations across the board. Now, SHRM is considered to be the leader in this space, but they are not even taking their own advice. So I would wonder, can we really still call them the leader? All right, let's get back to this case. On top of the investigator working with the manager when they were supposed to be investigating, on September 1st, 2020, 67 days after the employee filed her complaint, she was fired. And the reason that was given for her termination, a missed deadline. 1 day late on a project, which was actually caused by a third-party vendor's delay. Okay? So the timing of this all is a massive red flag in any employment case. It's what attorneys call the temporal proximity problem. When negative employment actions like demotions, pay changes, or even terminations follow shortly after someone legally engages in protected activity like filing a discrimination case or filing a discrimination complaint. The close timing of these two actions creates a presumption of retaliation that is really incredibly difficult to overcome, especially with such a minor infraction as the one that was stated in this reason. Now, HR professionals should know this. SHRM literally teaches this as the best practice. The close timing between the discrimination complaint and the termination is exactly the pattern that employment attorneys are looking for when they are building a retaliation case. At trial, 3 white colleagues testified that missed deadlines happened regularly within their department and that no one had ever been terminated for a single incident, especially one that was caused by external factors. So the jury reviewed everything. They looked at the timeline, they looked at the internal actions by SHRM, they looked at the emails, the testimony from both sides, they reviewed all of it. And on December 2nd, 2025, after deliberating for just 6 hours, they found SHRM liable for both racial discrimination and retaliation. They awarded $1.5 million in compensatory damages for emotional distress and career damage, and then awarded $10 million in punitive damages against SHRM. Let me emphasize this. Punitive damages are rare and they are serious. They aren't just regular damages. They are punishment damages. Courts only award them when an organization's conduct is found to be particularly egregious, malicious, or recklessly indifferent to someone's federally protected rights. And they require proof that the defendant, in this case SHRM, acted in that way. So, in other words, the jury didn't just decide that SHRM made a mistake. They decided SHRM knowingly violated the law or showed a complete disregard for it. And they wanted to send a message that would actually hurt the organization's bottom line to prevent something like this from happening again. So for context, many discrimination cases settle, right? And they will settle for far less. And many verdicts don't include punitive damages at all. The fact that the jury awarded nearly 7 times the compensatory amount in punitive damages speaks volume about how seriously they viewed SHRM's conduct. And you know what? After the verdict, SHRM released a public statement. They say the claim had no merit. Today's decision does not reflect the facts, the law, or the truth of how SHRM operates. We've acted with integrity, transparency, and in full alignment with our values. We will be pursuing all available legal options to address this unfounded verdict. Now look, SHRM has every right to appeal, and I get why they would. That is part of the legal process. But let's not ignore what the jury heard. An investigator who admitted he wasn't properly trained on discrimination investigations before going out to do an investigation. A termination that came just over 2 months after a discrimination complaint. Internal documents showing that the investigator was helping to build a case against the employee while supposedly investigating her complaint. Other employees who were of a different race were treated more favorably than Mohamed, who is an Egyptian American. And perhaps the most damning, SHRM's own chief HR officer admitted on cross examination that the investigation didn't follow several of the best practices that SHRM teaches to HR professionals. Now, if you brand yourself as the expert in workplace fairness, you don't get to skip the fundamentals when it's your own team under review. And I just want to say this case isn't just about SHRM. It's about all of us. How we show up as organizations, how we handle complaints, how we hold ourselves accountable. As HR professionals, we occupy a unique position. We're not just policy administrators or compliance officers. We are also ethical agents within our organizations. When we see leaders or processes that don't align with the values we claim to uphold, we have a professional obligation to speak up. The HR investigator in this case had a choice. When asked to build a case against an employee who had just filed a discrimination complaint, they should have said, hold on, this creates a conflict of interest. We need to make sure that our internal investigation is impartial. They could have also said, I haven't really been trained on this yet. Is there someone else who can handle this? Seems like this may be a complex situation. Maybe I can shadow that person. But they didn't. And this failure to maintain those ethical boundaries cost their organization millions. Now, if you're in HR, this is my reminder for you. Your process does matter. Your integrity also matters. Your willingness to stand up for fairness matters, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it means telling leaders things that they really may not want to hear. This is not just good HR practice. It is your ethical obligation to both your organization and the employees who trust you. If you're in leadership, your tone, your trust, your treatment of people matter more than you may even realize. How you respond to complaints sets the cultural standard for your entire organization. Are you creating a culture where people feel safe to raise their concerns? Or are you signaling that those who speak up will face consequences? And you need to remember that your actions are far louder than any policy or mission statement that you may have. If you are an employee watching this, knowing your rights and speaking up is still critical. While this case shows how some systems can fail, it also shows that justice is still possible. Document everything, know your company's policies, and hold them accountable to following them. And if you need external support, don't be afraid to go get it. Workplaces fail when organizations forget that people are watching. And guess what? People will make decisions based on what their leadership actually does, not just what they say they'll do. Now, this case is big because it looks at how such a large HR organization, one of the leaders in HR today, can say one thing, but then turn around and do something different. Now, I continue to teach HR content, and I do so because I believe in the practices that highlight fair workplaces, equitable practices, how we can lead better, how HR leaders can support their organizations, and how we can continue to work to rebuild the trust that has been lost in so many organizations with our employees. Having a DEI statement won't save you if you ignore bias in your own house. Promoting accountability will not matter if HR is helping to build a case against the person who complains. Workplace culture is defined by what you do when it's inconvenient. And when it comes to investigations, retaliation, or equity, if you don't practice it, you're putting your people, your reputation, and your organization at serious risk. So I want to hear from you. Does this case change your view of SHRM? Does it shift how you think about your own processes and procedures at work? Could your company survive a jury looking this closely at how complaints are handled at your organization? Let's have this conversation in the comments. Let's talk about it honestly and with a commitment to do better. And I want to help you learn how to build systems that protect your people and your organizations. So if you need resources, check out the description below. Click the subscribe button to connect with me and like this video, because I am here to help cultivate HR leadership that helps change the culture of organizations everywhere, not just in my organization. All right. I look forward to seeing your comments below. Like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.